Alright, YouTube, it turns out that the DCCC, the actual sort of Clinton campaign machine itself, their emails and their computer systems were hacked alongside the DNC. The WikiLeaks, when they release the DNC's email materials, Julian Assange and WikiLeaks have already said, well, that's just the first batch. We've got more. We're going to release more pertaining to the US elections. I'm going to presume that the next leak, which I would assume would come before the first debate, almost certainly has to do with what they managed to garner from whoever gave them the original batch of documents they released. Was probably the same party responsible for cracking Clinton's own campaign emails and things like that. This has their strategy guides. This has internal emails between staff and so forth. It probably has all sorts of stuff going on with donors, with major supporters, and so forth. I imagine that much of the material there is not too good. That is, that the only reason that they would be worried, they denied the FBI access to their campaign emails and things like that. Now, remember, the FBI is obviously under the thumb of Obama, who is a Democrat. He's the President of the United States. He oversees the overseer of the FBI. So it's not like there's any real danger of being prosecuted or having somebody from the FBI leak the Clintons' material. So then you ask yourself why they wouldn't want the FBI rifling through this information. It must be pretty bad indeed. Hopefully, whoever hacked the DNC is the same party that obtained the DCCC's material. Hopefully it's already in the hands of WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks has gone so far now that even Edward Snowden is saying, oh, well, they don't have any restraint. It's actually really funny to see one sort of pro-accountability, pro-transparency advocate who doesn't like the surveillance state, thinks there are problems in our elections, go after another sort of group that does the same thing because they're too draconian or something. I'm thinking Edward Snowden probably is more liberal, perhaps, than Julian Assange or something. Maybe he's fed up with the fact that Obama hasn't said, oh, well, the British should just fucking let him leave the embassy and not constantly browbeat him and try to drag him off for trial. I'm hoping that that will be the next dump from WikiLeaks. And if the hacker involved or the hackers involved haven't given that material to WikiLeaks or some other group that will release it, hopefully they do. The people have a right to know what's going on within campaigns. You have to look at it from this perspective. The political campaigns, the DNC, the RNC, these groups, they are corporate entities. They're not, people often think of them as they're just a political apparatus. Most of what they're involved in is getting money. Most of what they're involved in involves business. They are corporations. They're not public entities. They have their own internal rules. They're corrupt, just like any other corporate entity. When the Democrats properly identify that corporations are often corrupt, they're right, under our tax system especially, with Citizens United especially, which is one reason why Hillary would never seek to overturn it. She can promise that. She can make overtures as though she's interested in it once she gets elected, if she does, and thankfully that's decreasingly likely. But she would never actually push the issue so far that it would actually pass through Congress and get overturned, because then most of the people in Congress wouldn't get reelected. They're relying on corporate donations. They're relying upon big banks. If you think you want somebody who may actually overturn it, you're looking to Trump, who's self-funded and grassroots funded, the Libertarian Party that's been on board with overturning it since the beginning, or the Green Party, which fundamentally does the same thing. And these smaller parties, one of my big worries is that if they gained major party status, they would end up sucking the corporate teat and the bank teat like everyone else. Politicians seem to have this strange belief that they're reliant upon mass fundraising in an increasingly decentralized age in which it's no longer necessary to mass fundraise in order to fund something. It's no longer necessary. It's simply not. Grassroots, decentralized, self-funded, and smaller donations are probably the wave of the future. Putting out ads online is more effective at this point and costs a lot less at this point than putting them on television anyway. And you can do that for free through multiple social media platforms. It costs nothing to make a Facebook page. It costs nothing to set up a YouTube channel. You hook up a webcam, the whole apparatus for a couple $1,000s. You can have a fine setup for pushing a political agenda on YouTube. You can reach millions of people that way. It is far cheaper and far more effective. I can reach more people with a webcam, a microphone, a laptop computer, and my own talent this way for very, very little money. The cost of an internet connection and the cost of the actual materials, that's the only cost. If I have any talent at all, I can reach tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people here. If I were to spend that same amount of money on TV advertising, I would get one or maybe two 15-second ad slots on a second-tier local channel, and that's all it would get me. I would reach a few thousand people at most during prime time on such a channel, and nobody would give a fuck. It wouldn't matter. So it's a horribly inefficient way in which to fundraise anyway, but they justify it by trying to crack down on the smaller parties that are raising money that way. And you see another piece of evidence for the paradigm shift, and another piece of evidence I think the Democratic Party's screwed, blued, and tattooed. A lot of high-ranking sort of neoconservatives within the former Republican movement, which is no longer really a thing at this point, it's a paleoconservative party at this point, a lot of them are stating support for Hillary Clinton. Now, Trump isn't saying much about this. Why? He's going to wait till the debate, because he's giving his opponent and these people who have conducted an exodus from the Republican Party enough rope to hang themselves. It's not going to look good for Hillary, especially with younger voters, when you have Reaganites and Bushite sort of Republican neocons jumping aboard her campaign. Because it's just one more way for him to say, without having to say anything, oh, look, she's controlled by corporations and banks. Look at all these Democrats. For years, they told you that all these people were controlled by corporations and banks. Now they're all on board with her. They're not on board with me. Guess who's actually at bat for the American people? So WikiLeaks, I think that will be their next big leak. I don't know when they'll leak. Hopefully sooner rather than later. They need to get ahead of the news cycle that's covering this, keeping it in the news, and they need to push it further by releasing that material. And I think the one reason that they're waiting is because right now all of these groups are focused on Russia. The DNC has pushed the line, oh, well, the Russians did this, Trump applauding it as treasonous, the hackers were espionage agents, don't look too much into the content because, you know, the Russians want Hillary to lose. You know, it's funny, I'm pointing this out. Obama, when he was running for re-election against Mitt Romney, indicated that Romney's statement that the Russians were our main geopolitical foe in the world was wrong and was perhaps delusional for suggesting this, and said, no, they're not an enemy, they're really just an economic competitor at this point. You know, the Cold War's over, his famous line there. It is very funny, therefore, to see Obama and the rest of his party fixated singularly on the issue of Russia's conducting mass espionage against a political entity, Russia's conducting mass espionage against our corporations in partnership probably with the Chinese. It's very funny to see a party that has been so soft on Russia over time, generally speaking, with the exception of briefly after the crisis in Ukraine, suddenly up to bat in the name of their own political security, because these leaks are embarrassing, by blaming Russia. Now, of course, Russia denies it. If Russians were involved, it is far more likely that this was a private group of hackers, maybe government trained, maybe not necessarily in partnership with Putin or anyone associated with him. That's always a possibility. There are hackers in the United States, both singular hackers and groups of hackers, that conduct espionage and conduct hacking attacks and try to steal personal info for fiscal or political or social or whatever other reasons, or even for their own entertainment, that are not associated with the US government. There are hackers in China that do it as a sort of hobby, or they do it, again, for entertainment or for profit, but they're not on marching orders from Beijing. There are people all around the world in this tech-literate age that do such things, and they're not being paid for by a government. They're not being told what to hack by a government or by any other significant authoritarian entity. These people are the majority of those that are conducting hacking. The fact that you might find better trained individuals, I mean, think about it this way. This is probably important. The gross incompetence with which Hillary Clinton appears to manage her electronic systems, and the gross incompetence of the DNC in general. I think that they had one of the passwords to some of their systems was like Obama '08 or something like that. Like they hadn't changed it since 2008, and it was like 7 characters long. And you're wondering why you're assuming that some hacker on steroids with marching orders from Moscow and ties to a half a dozen security agencies in the Eastern world had to be involved to crack your password? No, any half-literate individual could do that. It's not nearly as much effort, I think, as you believe. And I'm not going to swallow the story because, again, the government agencies investigating this, with very little time apparently to investigate it and very little transparency from the Clinton campaign, declared unilaterally, oh, Russians were involved. Which Russians? Was it the Kremlin? Did they have their own private hackers do this? Was it some former communist agency of older dudes with Windows 95 running that set up a hacking system? Was it a bunch of younger individuals that just happened to be really tech literate? Which Russians? There are a lot of people in Russia. Not every single one of them works for the Kremlin. Again, it would be just like if an American hacking entity broke into the Kremlin's computers and stole a bunch of info, and Putin were to come out and say, oh, the United States is committing espionage against us. This is terrible. It's unethical. It's immoral. What do you think DC's response would be? It wasn't us. We didn't do it. Just because somebody hacked you from the US doesn't mean they were on our orders, you fuck shit. Well, you know, it's the same thing. The fact that Russia is sort of the big boogeyman of the entire world does not compel me to immediately, and this has been a fixture of my mentality for years, regardless of what sort of political banner I've been operating under. Just because I realize that Russia is an authoritarian state and a competitor with the US and a potential enemy at any time of all of NATO, doesn't mean that I trust my government blindly any time that it claims the Russians are responsible for something going wrong. Your cigarette didn't light. The tea came out too watery. It must have been a Russian espionage agent took some of the tea out of the bags or put some wax on the tip of your cigarette. No, that's just not, it just doesn't make sense. I hope these materials are released. The people, especially who are supporting Hillary, have a right to know if the content of that material which has been obtained, regardless of who obtained it, regardless of who ends up leaking it, whether it's WikiLeaks or somebody else, they have a right to know if, and only if, that material shows corruption on some criminal degree, or to a degree that the reasonable average person would consider it to be evidence of collusion, evidence of systemic corruption that goes beyond just, oh, well, this staffer was making racist jokes and emails. Oh, I don't give a fuck. Yeah, that's going to happen. It happens at universities, it happens in political parties, it happens all the time. And your lawyer probably cracks jokes about you too. But if it is more widespread than that, if there's, for instance, if these emails were to contain something to the effect of, oh, well, we're going to keep calling Trump racist to get the black voters, and we're going to use our partners in MSNBC and stuff to cover up the fact that the Clintons were responsible for mass incarceration of blacks or something like that. That would be something that black Democrats probably would want to know about their candidate being involved with. Or Latinos, for instance, the Taco Bowl engagement mentions within the DNC emails. If the DNC, which is apparently as inept as Hillary Clinton has been with electronic systems, is speaking like this on what appears to be a fairly regular basis, and if they're involved in mass colluding to deny a person who's running for the nomination from getting the nomination because they decided back in 2008 somebody else should get it because they were runner-up to Obama and they're a dynastic figurehead with a lot of corporate cash, then I have to assume that the Clinton campaign most likely operates under the same general set of ethics. In fact, I fear it might be worse. I fear that the DNC, after the next round of leaks, assuming that the leaks do come from the Clinton campaign itself, I fear that the DNC leaks will be so mild in comparison that people will forget all about the fact that it is the overarching political structure of the entire Democratic Party that is itself corrupt. And they will fixate just on Hillary and her campaign. It'll fuck her campaign. But in the future, what might end up happening is the next time around, people will forget all about the DNC leaks. They'll forget all about the fact that the DNC was also corrupt, and they'll say, oh, well, this Democrat's different. Now, one final aside. Saw an infographic posted earlier that sort of went through the more recent elections and how sort of Democrats that were running for the nomination were denied the nomination, even though they were more deserving of the nomination than the candidates that actually got the nomination. And it was something to the effect of, oh, back here against McCain, oh, I'm sorry your candidate lost, maybe next time we'll get real change. Just sort of buckle in and vote for the Democratic candidate because we can't let McCain win. And then they did the same against Romney. Now they're doing the same against Trump. And it shows it's actually pretty true. The Democratic Party has dragged its heels over and over. They keep promising the people of the Democratic Party, yeah, this time it'll be real progressivism. This time we'll really crush racism. We'll really lift people out of poverty. We'll really have no more wars. And every time it turns out to be a complete illusion. Now, I'm not dismissing the fact that the Republicans have obviously done this too. McCain would have been a warmonger. McCain probably would have fucked around with the economy. Mitt Romney would have been a warmonger. Mitt Romney would have fucked around with the economy. They're all statists. But the unifying feature is each time that it happens, the outsider loses. They keep the outsider going for a while and pay them some lip service, like what the Republicans did to Ron Paul. Which, by the way, the only reason Trump won, I hate to say it, he's talented, he's well-spoken, he does have some very good ideas. But he would have lost the nomination handily against any of the establishment candidates, regardless of his ability to gobble up the media cycle, if it weren't for changes in procedure and changes in delegate counts that were made specifically because Ron Paul came so close in so many states of winning. If Ron Paul had been an afterthought and they hadn't been worried about an outsider taking over the Republican Party, which appears to have, unfortunately for them, been the case, they would not have bothered. And the Democratic Party did the same thing. Their system worked better. Their system denied Sanders the nomination. However, the very existence of superdelegates, the apparent collusion within the DNC, is really harming Hillary's capabilities. And with at least one more major leak expected from WikiLeaks during the election, which is almost certainly regarding Clinton's own campaign emails and other materials, I see a very rocky road ahead for her. The fact that they've now confirmed, the campaign has come out and said, yeah, we were hacked too. Now, they were warned that they were being hacked and did nothing and didn't let the FBI step in and try to do anything about what had happened, or stop it or prevent it from happening again. This just shows that the content there must be far worse than the content within the DNC's systems, because I believe they didn't have a problem with it. Clinton and her staffers and aides obviously did. And I can't think of any reason why an FBI under the control of Obama and obviously being muzzled by Obama would be a threat to the Clinton campaign unless the materials there showed outright criminality. Now, Assange has said that his leaks through the election would probably result in Hillary Clinton going to prison. I don't think that will happen. But if I was going to think of something closely akin to that, I would have to assume that he's already read these materials, that he does have them from the DCCC, and that it's so bad that it makes the DNC leaks look fairly routine and boring, in which case Hillary has probably already lost the election. He'll let her ride high and then he'll knock her over the head with the next batch of leaks. Now, I don't think that Assange really cares. Of course, he's made it clear he's also not a Trump fan, and has likened both Trump and Clinton to venereal diseases in comparing their two various platforms. Therefore, I have to assume either hackers did at some point, maybe they did target the RNC, and it's actually true that the RNC hates Trump and there was nothing incriminating there, or at the very least, Trump's campaign is more cognizant of tech security. They're more hardened against espionage. They take security more seriously, and they haven't actually been successfully hacked by any of these groups. Either that or maybe he's saving the cherry on the cake for last, and right before the election we'll get a massive dump. It'll implicate them both, and they'll just both falter in the polls, and third parties will become the new large parties. By the way, the best thing that could happen, really, to the United States. Even if Gary Johnson's mediocre, and even if Jill Stein is a nutty anti-vaxxer. I had some fucking Green Party member on my video there where I called Jill Stein crazy, ranting about, oh, we believe in social progressivism, we want to protect the environment, we think that corporations should pay their fair share. I'm like, so basically you're just a Democrat that takes the environmentalist aspect of the far left more seriously. Okay, well, I've got that. Jill Stein's still nuts. I'm still obviously not going to fucking vote for her. I don't have really that much of a problem. They're better than the Democrats. They're more honest, at least, about what they want to do. They're more honest about their statism. The Democrats pretend to be, oh, we're the party of the working class. No, you're not. You never have been. The party of the Ku Klux Klan, and then the party of the New Deal that prolonged the Depression, and then thereafter the party of Carter's far leftism, which was laudable in its intent, but fell utterly flat, and then the party of boring Mondale and Dukakis and people like that, and then the party of sellout Clinton, who his wife is now the new nominee of your party. They sold the left out. They're not even liberals. They're just fucking corporate neocons, just like fucking Herbert Walker Bush, George W. They're all exactly the same. Trump at least is a paleocon or something close to it, or at least an old wave conservative of the Ike days or something like that. At least he can lay claim to not being a complete fucking neocon. Hillary Clinton is more of a Republican than Trump is. And I think when her fans realize that, that's really when shit's going to hit the fan. And that could happen very soon, assuming that WikiLeaks steps up its game and makes sure that this material gets out in an opportune time. Maybe they'll wait for a lull in the news cycle, and then they'll dump it on our heads. And people are like, oh shit, another leak. And then they'll comb through it and they'll say, oh shit, Hillary Clinton's fucked. That's about all. Peace out.